You're listening to the Hire Calling Podcast, your source for all things hiring, staffing, and recruiting. I'm Pete Newsome, and my guest today is Patrick Barbour, who I have not known very long at all, but wasted no time inviting him to come on the podcast because of what he's doing. Super innovative stuff. Patrick, how are you today?
I'm good, Pete. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, man. Immediately when we connected on LinkedIn, I said, this is someone that I need to speak with live and may as well do it publicly because you are doing something that is so unique, is so timely, that I wanted to be able to talk about it and share it to whoever is interested, which would be a pretty big audience of people, whether they realize it or not. But before we get into too much detail, you're the president of a staffing company and RecStack, which we'll talk about in a minute, but share a little bit about your background in recruiting and staffing before we get too deep into what we're really here to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pete. My background is actually in the oil and gas industry. I worked as a project manager running large capital projects for about 10 years. In 2017, I decided to exit the corporate life and start at the time, an industrial staffing company supplying skilled craft labor to oil and gas projects. That is since matured into a direct hire recruiting agency that specializes in placing engineers, superintendents, project managers in the oil and gas and commercial construction industries. But over the last 2.5 years, we also developed a platform that allows us to leverage AI and automation primarily for business development for our own recruiting agency. And that's really matured over the last 18 to 24 months, where we're now helping other people leverage the same technology to do the same for their business. In a nutshell, obviously there's a lot of detail in between there, but that's Cliff Notes version, if you will.
That's great. I appreciate it. So Search Now is your staffing business, still thriving, still going, of course. How's the market right now?
Yeah, the market, our niche specifically is very, very strong. Obviously, there's been some relatively significant political shifts, and at least in the United States as it relates to the oil and gas industry, which has benefited us significantly. And so we are fairly busy. Although being a founder of RecStack and getting to work with other agency owners who are in various niches, I would say that's probably not necessarily true for all niches in recruiting. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, and it just depends on where you're at. And yeah.
So there's been a lot going on politically. I didn't notice.
Oh, you didn't notice? Yeah. I'll send you some links after the show and get you read in on all that. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Bringing me up to speed. That's a great point that you make, though. As I've talked to peers around the country, it really depends on, are you in the right industry right now? Do you have the right niche? And you certainly do. I mean, that goes without saying, I think, for anyone who does pay attention to what's going on at any level. So congrats on that for sure. I'm in Central Florida. We recruit nationally, but it's generally corporate positions. And here where we are, the hospitality industry is so big, has been hit pretty hard recently with limited travel. And so it's kind of, I wouldn't say it's feast or famine, but depending on the industry, we're seeing, either celebrations or some concern right now that hopefully won't last very long. I think we're heading to a good spot.
No doubt. I agree. And I think the other thing, obviously demand in a niche is what everybody focuses on. And that definitely should be your primary demand. I think when you're evaluating your niche, or if you're starting out looking to get into a niche, picking a niche. But the other thing that I think a lot of people miss is really understanding the nuance of the niche that you are wanting to show up in and the channels and methods in which you're using business development, right? So different channels will work better or worse, depending on the maturity of the industry or the companies themselves, the budgets they have for internal infrastructure. So cold email, this shows up a lot, right? So if your target market is enterprise level businesses, companies that, let's say, can afford $50,000 a month for firewall software, you're pretty much not going to be successful cold emailing those companies, right? So that typically, I work with a lot of different founders, and sometimes one of the very first conversations that we have is that specifically, because I want to make sure that we're not going to be trying to knock on a door through a channel that I have some relative certainty that it's not going to work. And a lot of people don't think about that specifically.
I agree 100%. And I've experienced that firsthand when we turned to digital marketing about 6 years ago. It was something that, as you probably are familiar with, our industry, the staffing industry in particular, hasn't embraced like many industries have. I tend to go all in on things if I discover something that I find attractive. I suspect you do too. And fell in love with the power of digital marketing. But what I quickly realized is we could primarily leverage that to attract SMB clients. not enterprise organizations. To your point, they're never going to get on Google and figure out how to find a staffing company. They have a line of 50 out the door if they're a name brand or a sizable employer at all. It's really wise that you would approach it that way. And it resonates with me and anyone who's tried to do something different in terms of business development and how they go about prospecting. You really have to understand the audience and how they're going to receive the message and the medium that you can use, or it'll be a disaster pretty quickly.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Yeah. And it's surprisingly, it seems to be an area where a lot of people are not really thinking and paying attention to. I'll talk to folks who I just talked to somebody recently who specializes in placing CPAs in accounting, which is notoriously what I would consider to be a supply constrained niche. I would say right now, the majority of recruiting niches are demand constrained, meaning it's much harder to get the client than it is the candidate. That niche specifically, I think, is completely the other way around. You can, with your eyes closed, run into 100 different accounting firms who would hire a CPA on the spot. And if you can deliver that, then you would be in business. But finding the candidates and attacking it that way. And so when I presented it to them that way, leading with a candidate is, and how we do that, what are the nuances around those candidates specifically that typically keep their butts in the same seats for a long period of time? And what are the things that typically move the needle for those candidates to get them even remotely interested in making a move? And then focusing on that primarily, thinking about it through those lenses, I think is also important. It's not just, do these people need me or not? There's usually more layers to the onion.
There absolutely is. And it's clear that you've spent a lot of time thinking about this and that firsthand experience, right? Because you don't just show up and figure these things out. They're not necessarily intuitive. You have to know the market, and then you have to know, or I'll say, have some experience approaching the market and getting feedback along the way. And the more reps you get at that, the better your information is going to be, and then you can apply it. But again, our industry, and this is a good segue to start talking about AI, is very tried and true in how we've done things. And I started the same way. My company's 20 years old now, but the industry when I started hadn't changed much in the previous 20, 30 years. It was being local, knocking on doors, shaking hands, kissing babies, making lots of phone calls, traditional sales, taking people out, doing that whole thing. And it is a relationship based business because it's difficult to differentiate yourself from one competitor to the next. We all have access to the same candidate pool. We use largely the same tools, although I'll caveat that by saying that it's changing rapidly right now, the tools that we use. But historically, we've all kind of had the same offering. And so you really had to differentiate yourself based on the individual relationships. I think that's changing at lightning pace right now. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree. And we've actually seen evidence of this in other recruiting markets. The UK is a great place to go and find that, where the commoditization phenomenon of recruiting and staffing has been a race to the bottom, where it's super transactional. It's people just basically pushing resumes across an email, so on and so forth. And I would say, generally speaking, right now, even today as we're recording this, May 20th, 2025, there are AI agents and platforms out there, at least from the transactional part of recruiting. And when I say transactional part, I'm talking about creating candidate market maps, lead scoring those candidates against some requirements to some degree, creating copy that then reaches out to those candidates and sequencing it in omni-channel. All of that today can be done by AI, and probably better than you and me, and done at a higher level and more consistent, and so on and so forth. And hiring managers, companies, P&L, people that are managing P&Ls within an organization, some are aware that it exists. Some probably suspect that it might be out there, but I would say that it's still fairly early. At some point, though, that toothpaste is going to be out of the tube. And so, as recruiters, as agency owners, you really have to start thinking about what is going to allow a hiring manager, a business leader, to make a good business case decision to stroke you a $20,000 check for a recruiting fee. What is that going to look like? Because what I would call the legacy or traditional offer of recruiting, of just tapping into your network and pool of bench of candidates, et cetera, I think that the value of that is significantly diminishing as we move forward with AI and other technology suites. For me, the answer to that question is helping and assisting those leaders solve problems, not only the actual recruiting and transactional part of getting candidates in butts and seats in their organization, but helping them solve problems upstream of recruiting that they're having to figure out before they reach out to Pete or Patrick to help fill that role. So things like employer brand reputation, load leveling a department with making sure that they have the right headcount requirement based on company demand, SLAs, these sorts of things, I think really will help to justify and build the value, continue to build the value or sustain the value that those leaders would see in investing money in a service like that.
I agree. That's very well said. And you mentioned the toothpaste being out of the tube. I think it's out of the tube and hardly anyone realizes it.
Yeah,
I almost feel like Chicken Little when we start talking about AI, where again, maybe it's my OCD passive nature, where once I latch on to something, I tend to go deep. And I've been going deeper and deeper in AI since Sam Altman put out his first tweet. I think it was late November. Was that 2022? Which seems crazy, right?
that's right.
How long ago it was now, saying, "Hey, check out this new product we just launched." Right now, it's Chat GPT, of course. And I just happened to see the tweet within an hour of him putting it out, and went, "Okay, the world will never be the same again." And that was just the tip of the iceberg. So as I've gone deeper, as I've adopted tools even recently that didn't exist a few months ago, right? These things are changing so fast. I look around and don't think most people are reacting to a significant enough degree to what's happening right now. I want to get your opinion on that. And if you agree, and I suspect you probably do, why is that? What do you attribute that to? Because it's something I find curious. I mean, I want to get more into the details of RecStack, and let's do
Yeah.
that. But just on AI in general, I think it is going to change the job market so fast, so significantly, and we're just not taking it seriously enough.
You're spot on. It is happening. And I think the main reason is not due to a lack of ignorance. I think that at least recruiters, anyways, I think the majority of them realize and recognize that AI is for real. It is changing the game. I think the constraint with most folks is just a lack of really knowing anything about it, or knowing where to begin and how to dig in and not spin their wheels and get overwhelmed and that sort of thing. The bottom line, and this is not to segue too soon into RecStack, but this is one of the problems that we wanted to solve with RecStack, in that recruiters, we don't make our money by fiddling with shiny objects and AI and technology. They're a tool that we use to, help, fuel an actual business motion. But recruiters actually make their money by building relationships, having conversations with clients and candidates, and attending events and doing lunch and learns and this sort of thing, right? Getting deals done. And so that's primarily, I think, for most recruiters, that's where their skill set it lies, right? That's where they're really strong in. Some folks have the ability to dabble and develop additional expertises and leveraging different tech stacks and platforms and what have you. But by and large, I would say that's not the case for most recruiters. And because of that, because there's just a big question mark around it, it becomes like this paralyzing effect where they just don't, they freeze up. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to say. And then you have some folks who really go like the hardliner way of, oh, AI is not going to replace me, and, da 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 da. And that may be true to a certain extent, but the recruiter, and I'm happy to talk more in detail about what I mean by that, but the recruiters that understand how to leverage AI will be able to produce far more than those that don't. And yeah, at some point we'll likely be able to run circles around. And for the recruiters that aren't really elevating their service offering in terms of the value that they're delivering to those clients, like we talked about a minute ago, and helping solving other problems other than just pushing resumes across an email, those folks are going to become obsolete fairly quickly.
There's so many directions we could take this
Yeah, I
in,
know.
and I don't want to take too much time before we get into RecStack, because that's what we're here to talk about. But when I think of the recruiting, the staffing business, forget back office operations for a minute. That's its own discussion. We could talk for hours
Right.
about that too, and how AI is going to impact it or can impact it right now. But when you think of sales and recruiting, I tend to separate those generically, even though we know they're very intertwined in how we actually operate. But I would say, other than the few positions like CPAs that you mentioned, and maybe some of the spaces you're involved in with very specialized roles, but generally speaking, it is the challenge of staffing companies is to generate new business, right? To prospecting. If you say assign a percentage to it, I would say 90% of collectively staffing companies' challenges are new business, and then 10% is recruiting. We can always get better at recruiting, but of the two, one limits your growth, right? Much more than the other. And so, yeah, but before we get into RecStack, just from an AI standpoint with recruiting, How much do you think it should be involved in right now in terms of the day-to-day processes that have been manual forever? Where do you think that lies between where the handoff from AI goes to a human? I have my opinion on that, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. To start out, I say this to any founder that I work with. If you're a direct hire agency and you're doing less than $1 million a year, I can guarantee you that virtually nobody knows you exist. Like that you can almost bank on it. And for staffing companies, that's going to be a little bit different. Maybe turn that into more of an EBITDA type assessment, right? Because top line for staffing is usually much higher. But by and large, if you are under that threshold, virtually nobody knows you exist. And as a result, your number one focus, the number one problem that you have to solve for in your business is letting people know about your stuff. That is literally it, right? And so that is, in my opinion, where AI and automation really comes in terms of lead generation, getting the message out, doing it in a strategic and data driven way so that you're actually reaching people in your ICP, but also not only just reaching people in your ICP, but reaching people that are in your ICP that are actually experiencing things in their business right now that create an immediate demand for your service, and using that as an angle to not only know who to reach out to, but when to reach out to them and what to say based on what's going on in their business. We call those sales triggers, but that's a big part of what AI should be doing. And in terms of percentage, it should be doing 100% of that work. Today, if you are doing any of that, if you're someone who is doing any type of outbound where you're scraping lists, you're cleaning lists, you're writing copy and sequencing cold emails together and spin taxing and trying to figure out templates and all of that, you're already behind. You need to stop doing that. 100% of that needs to be automated. And that is, I was on a webinar last week and this came up. That is actually the gold of these tools, right? RecStack, and there's a bunch of others. The tool itself is not going to grow your business. Just because you sign up for a tool like RecStack or you start using AI and automation and agents and this sort of thing to do lead gen, your business is not going to grow. The growth actually happens from what you do with the time that gets freed up by the AI, by the automation, and that you backfill it with more of the activity that actually moves the needle in your business. Attending events, doing lunch and learns, talking to clients, talking to candidates. Now that if you were doing all of the lead gen stuff manual before, and that was eating up, say, 4 hours a day, 3 hours a day, if all of a sudden you can now repurpose that to doing the stuff that is actually going to generate revenue for your company, just a force multiplier of volume will cause growth in your business. Where I do see some folks trip up, they will be early adopters to technology like this. They'll start seeing results, but then they don't repurpose the time that they get back to actually ring the register on what they've gained from the automation and the technology itself. And yeah, I'm getting, I'll talk to people, oh, I'm getting all these leads and this is great, but I'm not making any more money. And so the first thing I always say is show me your calendar. Just share your screen and show me your calendar. And they'll pull up their calendar and it's like golf and gym and all of this really cool, fun stuff, but it's not backfilled with more client calls and visits and events and so on and so forth. And so that's actually, a lot of people get wrapped around the axle on that, where it's not the AI that's actually making you money, and it's not going to replace you. That's the other thing. Like, oh, you're right. AI is not going to replace you. It's going to allow you to do more as long as you're willing to do more. Now, people that have teams obviously have an advantage in that, but we work with a lot of solo 360 recruiters that don't have that luxury and they miss that mark.
Yeah, I think your product is perfect for someone who is on their own, right? Because it's when I started, I was by myself. It's a common story for someone who starts a staffing company. And I quickly realized I could, as soon as I got my first rec, which took about a week, I couldn't be out selling and recruiting. I couldn't be in two places at once. So I hired my first recruiter much sooner than I anticipated based on my original business plan. I actually threw it in the trash. Well, this is no good. But folks who don't have that option and have to stay on their own, your solution is perfect for them. I think it's really exciting. So let's start to get into that a little bit.
Sure.
Tell me about your journey that led you to building RecStack in the first place. Was there a light bulb moment, or how did you evolve into that?
Yeah, it was really solving our own problem. I guess about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, our marketing motion, if you will, our business development motion really evolved from primarily cold emailing at the time. This was like pre-COVID and COVID years where basically you could you could send an email to anybody and shoot your agreement across and they would sign it. And so shortly after COVID, that began to change very quickly. And so I began to learn more about omni-channel triggers, this sort of thing, and started hiring consultants and piecing together a motion that began to work quite well. However, to make it work at a high level and have it run consistently was painful. At the height, we had about 3 full-time VAs in the Philippines managing this motion. We were subscribed to about 15 different platforms. Our monthly cost just to run that motion alone was about $7,500 a month. And it wasn't very consistent. If anybody's hired a VA, I know there's good ones out there. I don't want to get hate mail in my inbox. I know there's good VAs out there, but a lot of them are not great and can be unreliable. And so we were not immune to that. And yeah, we had a good year, and I said, to hell with this. Technology is starting to evolve. This is back when tools like Clay and these sorts of things started hitting the scene, and really expanded my mind in terms of what could be possible. And so we put some money together and started building this thing out. And yeah, it's grown to where it is today.
That's beautiful. We all have a story behind innovation, and it's usually because things aren't working out exactly as we needed them to. I never in a million years, my website for the first 13 years of Four Corner Resources was 5 pages. And I would say things like, what the hell are you supposed to put on a staffing website? We find you have needs, we find people, like, that's it, here's our address. Next thing I know, when I discovered the power of digital marketing, my whole perspective changed, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. And you started going down this road, and sounds like you realized, hey, there's lots of options out there, but if I do it myself, I can control the outcome a whole lot better, which I, again, commend you for doing. Not many people will take that step because it takes a lot of effort, right? That's not easy to build something, to do something new and innovative. So where did you, that's a whole, maybe I'll interview you one day about how you built it, right? But I think what people want to hear is what RecStack does. Just start from the basics. We know it's for business development primarily, but walk through what it does. It's almost like magic, right? When you see what AI can do right now.
Yeah, totally. So RecStack, if you go to our website, you'll see that RecStack is actually positioned as a recruitment business in a box. It's designed to really consolidate all of the technology platforms that a recruitment agency would need into one platform. But the really sexy part of the system, as you pointed out, is what we do with our business development motion. And so essentially, what we're really big believers in is taking a two-pronged approach. Having a really strong, what we call trigger-led omni-channel outbound motion, where we are proactively and aggressively reaching out to and playing offense with the types of leads that are experiencing things in their business that indicate that they would probably need us, in parallel to also having a really strong kick-ass brand through content creation and really high quality content, adding value, lead magnets, short form video, this sort of thing, across at a minimum LinkedIn and YouTube. If you're in recruiting and you're not showing up in those 2 places, you're really missing out. Those are the 2 top platforms where B2B decision makers are going to get educated these days. And so you definitely want to show up there. So having both of those working in parallel is what we believe needs to happen in recruiting agencies to have consistent and stable business development. And yeah, that's the way RecStack has been designed. In my experience and in my opinion, recruiters have 2 problems that they have to solve in order to do business development at a high level. You need to be able to, 1, catch people's attention, and 2, you need to be able to build trust with them very quickly. We are in a trust recession, as I like to say. Business decision makers, business leaders, the markets have matured. They've been sold to a gazillion different ways. And so they're far more protective of their time. They're far more skeptical. And so that's why the content piece of things is so important, right? We catch people's attention through the triggers because it's timely, it's super custom and relevant and personalized. But we also need to very quickly build trust. And so that's where content, putting yourself out there, sharing things that you are expert in, et cetera, that helps deliver both of those as a 1-2 punch. So yeah, at a high level, that's what we do.
So let's share some info on the triggers, if you will. And that caught my attention right away when I first went to your website. And it resonated with me very strongly because one of the things I've shared with my team for years is I've tried to encourage people on how to sell effectively. I'll just say sometimes I'm better at that than others, but that was my background, right? I was a sales guy and I knew that I could sell when I started the business. It was very natural for me. But as I alluded to earlier, that's a limitation that many staffings have, is how to scale a sales organization. And one of the things about our industry is that the buyers put out a sign in their front yard telling you their house is for sale, right? It's like a billboard. We have a need and the whole world knows it, and it's on you to capitalize, right? And most industries don't have that luxury. I sold technology solutions for years. I had
Yeah.
to dig to find out if and when there was going to be a need, where your pain points, all that stuff that we know is necessary. Not in staffing, right? Not in direct hire. They show you that they have a need. You've picked up on some things beyond that. So if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts on those sales triggers.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, in my opinion, the days of just blasting your ICP, your ideal client profile, just because they have this job title in a company that's in this industry with this headcount, that is a waste of time and a waste of resources. A lot of people don't realize this, but if you go to sites like SalesLoft and Gong and these sorts of things, they do a lot of really good research on B2B sales and have a lot of really good data out there. That I read a study about 6 months ago. In your total addressable market, in your TAM, at any given time, only 3 to 5% of that TAM is actively looking for your solution right now. And so when you think about cold outreach, so if you're cold calling, you're emailing, you're DMing people on LinkedIn, et cetera, you're really only going after that sliver of the pie, right? That 3 to 5%. That's what you're trying to capture. The reality is that even of that sliver of the pie, the 3 to 5%, half of those people have already decided who they're going to work with, right? Because when they were in the other part, the other 95% of the pie, they were getting nurtured and absorbing content and building relationships and all that. So think about it that way. If you're only really trying to capture that 1.5 to 2% of your TAM at any given moment, then the effort that you put behind it and who you're reaching out to needs to be extremely focused, right? If not, you're kind of pissing in the wind, for lack of a better phrase. In terms of triggers themselves, we focus on both company level triggers and persona level triggers. Okay, at the company level, we tested over 35 different sales triggers that were used across all sorts of different industries that have a sales motion. And what we found were there were 4 really strong sales triggers at the company level that worked really good for a recruiting and staffing offer. And so those 4 were essentially hiring, which is pretty standard, what you've already alluded to, hiring being we can look at companies that are posting jobs on job boards. So we look at LinkedIn job postings, we look at Indeed job postings, we also scrape company career pages and for the types of roles that we want to place. Pretty straightforward, but we do that in obviously an automated way and at scale. The second one is a trigger that we like to call vacancy. And so the vacancy trigger is where we're actually monitoring the types of candidates that you like to place and work with. And what we're looking for is when one of those candidates makes a move to another company, what we're doing is we're looking back at the company that they just left. We're finding the decision maker, the hiring manager in that organization for that role. And then we're reaching out and saying, hey, Pete, I saw Patrick Barbour just left for X, Y, and Z competitor. We can backfill that role, et cetera, et cetera. I'm paraphrasing, but that's the angle that we're taking. The third trigger that we like to monitor and run is what we call leadership change. And so that's where we're looking for any type of director, VP, C-suite level leader that is new to an organization in your ICP. Typically, not always, but typically there's some sort of headcount shakeup, right? Where they're building out their own team and so on and so forth. Sometimes they're coming in to cut the fat and right size the business. And so it's not always 100% relevant, but it is a very productive and good angle to take. Also a great way to start making relationships with new leaders. We found that to be maybe not initially bearing fruit right out of the gate, but further down the road, it tends to yield fairly well. And then funding, which is also, depending on your niche, not always relevant. If you're in hospitality, for example, that might not be a relevant trigger. But for those that where this would be relevant, any companies that are being funded by private equity, venture capital, government subsidies, usually that's to fuel some sort of growth initiative that requires human capital. So those are the 4 that RecStack, our GTM team will build out and customize to your niche and basically run automated, if you will, and replenish leads automated as those companies begin to come through those triggers, if you will. And we use that to drive. Now, sorry, go ahead.
Those are things that a human can all identify on
Yeah.
their own, be done manually. Collectively, humans are terrible at that, right? Companies spend so much money on systems and tools that will enable people to do that effectively and on a schedule and track it, manage it, all of the above. And it fails over and over, right? And there's so many different failure points.
Right.
with a human involved in that. And it's time consuming, right? That's the other thing. Everything you just mentioned, it makes so much sense. You hear it. And so thank you for sharing that. I really wanted you you did exactly what I was hoping for. You explained what's on your website, which jumped right out at me because it's so obvious, so straightforward, yet so incredibly difficult to execute.
That's right.
And that I don't it have turned to marketing personally if I knew how to figure that out with humans. We don't need humans to do it anymore. That's the point.
That's right.
So I won't ask you to share your secret sauce on how you do it, but this is something that I want to make sure everyone understands. If you start working with someone from an onboarding standpoint, I'll make an assumption here is that you gather what that ICP looks like, you understand their parameters, and once that takes place and you say go, it's just going to work, right? It's going to happen. Obviously, I'm sure there's some hands-on stuff you need to do along the way, but touch on that a little bit. Once that initial engagement begins, what do you do? And then what do your customers do with RecStack?
Yeah, absolutely. So our goal for our RecStack users is to keep you out of the system as much as possible until we have leads coming in and saying, "Hey, Pete, I'd like to learn more. I'd like to jump on a call," so on and so forth. Upstream of that, the majority of everything is fairly done for you, either by the automation or our team specifically. Our onboarding process is fairly robust. We have a client success manager, Lisa, who's awesome at her job. And one of the very first things that she does with new clients is a deep dive in your ICP and in your niche. We have a framework that she'll follow and walk new clients through so that we're pulling the information that we need to essentially build out these custom campaigns for your niche specifically. And then from there, obviously, there's a back and forth where we take it to our engineering team, they put it together, then we show it to the client and kind of walk them through, okay, who are we reaching out to? What are we saying? Is this what you had in mind? Yes, no, and we calibrate from there. The actual motion itself from an actual launch standpoint is obviously the trigger is identified, and then there's a series of enrichments that take place where we're leveraging integration partners, but also AI agents to go and do a lot of what we call research enrichments, where we're researching the company, we're lead scoring the company, first of all, to the ICP to make sure that this is for sure the type of company and opportunity that our client wants to go after. We're enriching for contact data, of course, email addresses, cell phone numbers, because we do like to reach out via omni-channel. And then we'll do research enrichments where we're research, just like what you would do manually, right? If I was going to write a really awesome email to my dream 100 CEOs of companies that I'd want to work with, I would probably take a couple hours for each CEO and I would research their company. I would want to know what they do, what they sell, who their clients are, what that pain point looks like. Is there any recent news items out there that might be relevant, regulatory, what have yous, et cetera, et cetera. And I would use that information to write a really awesome email that is, taking advantage and leveraging the angle of the trigger to cut through the noise and catch their attention and so on and so forth. And so basically what we're doing with these agents is exactly that, except at scale. So we'll deploy them to go research the company, the person. If it's like a hiring trigger, for example, and they have a job posting posted on a job board, we'll overlay the job posting with the research that we know about the company and the person and help to understand what the perfect candidate would look like for them specifically in that role. And then use that to write really custom copy, very personalized. There's no spin taxing or templates or anything like that. It's one of one as if a human was writing it. And so that's motion, if you will.
It's hard not, yeah, it's hard to, as you're talking, blending these things together that individually are so time intensive, right? You went from the enrichments to the writing of the email, where if you separate those, and I think we should, I want everyone listening to know really what we're talking about. First, we have to identify the need and the prospect and the contact information, or the opportunity, I'll just say. You go through the process of identifying the contact information and gaining knowledge about that prospect. That's an enormous savings of time. There's if there's a better use of AI, I don't know what it is, but this is something no one likes to do. It's inherently necessary to do, and those who don't do it are going to not be very successful, right? So it's something we know we need to do. No one likes to do it. No one has time to do it effectively. And you're cutting that entirely out of the process by having the agent do it all for them. If you could, the phrase enrichment is one that is very closely associated with everything that you're describing, but maybe unfamiliar to people. So could you describe that from a high level, what that means in this world of AI?
Yeah. Another way of thinking about enrichment would be getting information, right? So if we talk about a contact data enrichment, We are getting the contact data information, the cell phone number, the email address, what have you, of that contact. If we're talking about a research enrichment, we're talking about getting the information and the level of detail and specificity and nuance that we would want to use and leverage in an email that we're sending or a DM that we're sending to somebody that would be totally different than probably 99% of the other recruiters that are in the DMs and in their inbox saying the same, hey, how's everything going? We do contingent search and this sort of thing. Saw you're hiring, like all of that. Like we're taking.
You mean the dozen emails I get a day, people asking if I need a staffing company?
Yeah, exactly. Those would be the ones. Exactly. And
Or if I'm looking for a job.
That's right. Yes, exactly. I get text messages on that now for remote roles, which is pretty funny. Yeah. So enrichment is just another way of saying getting the information that we need to do whatever the thing is, right?
So a huge expenditure of time, legwork, research, like you said, whatever it is, need to do it. No one likes to do it. Often doesn't get done. So now that's the second piece. And the third is the actual content creation. So that's where I wanted to stop and not have those things blended together because I think they warrant an individual description. So we've identified the opportunity, the prospect, we've learned about them, and now you're using that to craft a custom message with, again, humans aren't touching this at all.
That's right. Yeah. There's no human touching this. It's all 100. There is some calibration on the front end in terms of onboarding and getting it dialed into your ICP and all that. But once that's set, it's relatively set it and forget it, for lack of a better phrase there. But yeah, you're right.
So what does someone need to have when they come to you and want to use RecStack? What do they need? Is there a specific ATS or CRM tool that they need to already have purchased? How does that work?
No, we actually have a built-in CRM and ATS in the tool. So if you're not in love with your CRM or ATS, you can cut that expense and use ours. We do have users who are absolutely in love with theirs and they want to keep it. And so you can have that, but there's no prereq per se for using RecStack in terms of technology and tech stack. The one thing that you do need to be willing to have a willingness to do, and we haven't really talked about it much on this call yet, but you need to be willing to create content. I cannot stress how important that is. The outbound motion is obviously the sexy thing and it definitely works. But as I mentioned before, you're really only capturing in reality about 1.5 to 2.5% of your total addressable market if that's all you're doing to generate leads for your business. If you're not creating content, you're missing two things here. One, for those leads that you're reaching out to through that outbound motion, I can assure you that even if your email or DM or what have you is relevant and timely and it catches their attention, the very next thing that they're going to do is they're going to go check you out. Just like if you were to order something on Uber Eats, right? You're not going to order something on Uber Eats from a restaurant that, doesn't have pictures of their food and a menu to select from and so on and so forth. This is no different. Buyers in general have never had more information at their fingertips to make informed buying decisions. And so they're going to go to check you out. Typically, they're either going to go to your website, but these days we find folks actually going directly to your LinkedIn page. And the reason being is because people want to work with people. I hate to be cliche, but that's actually the truth. And so if they go to your LinkedIn profile or your website and it looks every other recruiter's profile and website and there's no content, there's nothing that you're sharing that is giving them the warm and fuzzy that you understand their market or that you can actually help them or that you're teaching them anything, it's very hard to build trust from that point on. So if you remember two things that we have to solve for: catching people's attention and building trust, that's where the trust part comes in. And I talk to a lot of people who are just running an outbound motion. They're not really big on content. They don't really put any time into their brand. And for those folks, they'll generate leads on the cold outbound, but they're very hard to convert. This is where you hear people complain about people getting ghosted and this sort of thing. It's just because they're not convinced that you haven't sold them. They don't trust you completely yet that you're the right one. You had a good message, it was timely, etc., but you didn't move the ball forward. And so that is the first problem that content solves for in the short term, right? In the long term, obviously, the other 95% of your total addressable market who are people that you want to work with and can work with, but they're just not buying from you right now. That's how you are nurturing those folks in the meantime until they move into that other bucket. And then when they do, if you're doing that at a high level and you're leveraging persona triggers, which we haven't talked about yet, that's where inbound lead generation comes from, and so on and so forth. And so yeah, that's super super important.
Well, you've touched on it twice, and I think it's something that is, I guess, looked at in the wrong way from salespeople who are motivated to put up numbers immediately, and that is a near-term opportunity, immediate need. Are we going to be able to work on that? Versus, I'm just laying the groundwork for a long-term relationship. And when back in my selling days, I would almost run the other way if I met someone for the first time and they said, "So glad you're here. Here's a need that I have." Because what follows that is no one else has been able to fill it. We're paying 30% under market. Our interview process is unrealistic. We can't make a decision, whatever it is. I don't know what the problem is, but I know there is a problem. And if someone's too eager to work with me up front, or that initial contact will lead to an opportunity, that means they're going to open that door for everyone else. And so I see immense value in making that initial contact that doesn't lead to an immediate opportunity. And to your point, having content that you create on a regular basis, I mean, have certainly seen the value and power of that over the past 6 years. Where, as I joked about it, it's not really a joke. It makes me cringe when I'm embarrassed. If anyone has access to the Wayback site, you can see what our website was. I hate to think how much business was lost because someone went to our website, saw there was nothing unique about it. It didn't offer any kind of authority or credibility building when they look at it, and they would move on and we would never know it.
Yep.
And now I have a high level of confidence that the opposite will happen. That website will enhance our credibility and authority and start to build trust, right? And in addition to reviews and all of those things that we pay attention to that for years we ignored. So even without all the efforts that RecStack can produce for someone, having content is such a missed opportunity for staffing companies. So I really like that you're reiterating that because it's something that is very near and dear to my heart, independent of AI. But as you said, everyone has access to information at their fingertips now. They're going to use it. And if you don't stand up to that test, you'll never know. They'll just move on.
That's exactly right. And I think the other thing too, so like most recruiters are not creating content at all. And so just by doing content, even if you're not very good at it, which spoiler alert, if you haven't done it before, you're going to suck at this at the beginning. That's just like anything else new that you're doing, you're not going to be very good at first. And then the more you do it, the better you're going to get. You get the reps in. It's like building a muscle, right? The more reps I do, the stronger I get, so on and so forth. And so that also applies here, like everything else in life. That being said, just doing it, there very quickly needs to be a maturation in the way that you're doing it, the types of content that you're putting out, the different modalities, if you will. I'm a big proponent of lead magnets. I'm a very big proponent of short form video, this sort of thing. I am a very big proponent of talking about nuanced things to your niche. One of the things that I absolutely hate with content these days from recruiters that are doing it is the weekly post of why it's a bad idea to lowball offer candidates, or why it's important to give quick feedback after an interview to your recruiter. These types of talking points, I can assure you that there's not a hiring manager out there that needs to be reminded of these things, and you're not adding any value to their life whatsoever by posting that once a week. You really aren't. And another really easy way to differentiate yourself from other recruiters is by not talking about that stuff and talking about other problems that those folks are experiencing, ideally upstream of working with someone like yourself, in offering solutions, insights, opinions, perspectives on how to solve for those things. And yeah.
And sharing your experiences, right?
That's right.
That's something everyone can do.
That's right.
Even if you haven't been doing it a long time. And I think that's a missed opportunity. And we know, you know this better than most, I'm sure, that in this world of AI, LLM, SEO, if you will, having personal experience is one of the few differentiators you can have. Everyone's creating ChatGPT content and post it,
Yep.
right? Which I think is a credibility killer, but that's
100%.
That's a different story. I get a kick out of everyone latching onto that now. But unfortunately, LinkedIn rewards the wrong kind of content, in my opinion, right? So if you bash an employer, you're going to get a million likes. If you give a candidate bad advice, we joke about this internally. There's some big accounts that will say things like, I had a candidate show up 30 minutes late for an interview and I hired them on the spot because if they were still willing to show up, that shows that they're dedicated to the job, whatever kind of BS it is. You know who I'm talking about probably, because this person will post the same kind of message every month. get a million likes and shares. They're making money off of it. And it's the polar opposite message that we should be sending. Someone needs to be willing to share honest information, even though it's not going to be popular. And unfortunately, that platform continues to reward the wrong kind of content. So I agree 100% with what you're saying. I also have to acknowledge that most people aren't going to get much satisfaction from posting that information, and it's going to be difficult to do. And maybe I'll say that as someone we post a lot of content, we create a lot of content. Not all of it gets likes and views, but it's the body of work over time
That's right.
that matters. And even though some of our content is generic, some of it's highly specific, what matters is someone is going to see that we've been doing it to a point where they can't really question whether we're experienced or have knowledge in the space, right? And that's as much as anything what is worth doing it for that reason alone, right? People are going to find you. And then the question is, what do they see when they do? And we all have the ability to control that for ourselves.
That's right. The other thing to consider is vanity metrics. I don't want to be cliche. They're great, but that doesn't necessarily translate to revenue. The other thing that a lot of recruiters don't realize is that your target persona that you're trying to reach, the audience that you're trying to reach, are typically senior business leaders, whether they're a departmental manager or a C-suite executive, VP, et cetera. Those folks are not publicly engaging and interacting with content for obvious reasons,
Yes.
right? They have eyeballs on
Yes.
them. So don't expect, I tell people, don't, and our content very rarely just goes viral. Not that's a bad thing. I think that there's obviously a lot of juice to going viral and having a broad reach. But I don't get super excited when I see a post from a recruiter and it has 100 likes, and I look at those likes and they're all other recruiters, right? Those aren't the people that I'm selling to. I do think that there is a little bit of an advantage of that. If there was someone else, like a decision maker, looking at that and saying, wow, this person got 100 likes, that definitely could help add credibility. And I do see that and agree that it probably does help quite a bit. But those are not the people that are buying from you, right? Those are not the people that are paying your bills. So that's important to keep in mind. And the other thing strategically and what you're creating in terms of content and how you're allowing people to opt into moving forward with you, you need to give them a private channel to do that from. And so that's where lead magnets really come in and crush it for us in terms of being able to pass that through a DM where I can say, hey, Pete, I've got this training that I did 2 weeks ago on how we load level engineering departments in the petrochemical industry. Would you be interested in it? And they can privately say, yeah, I would be interested in that, which is them privately raising their hand, indicating that, hey, we might be doing some load leveling and this and so on. And so we pass that off. And then now we've got a conversation that we can then mature into a book call and so on. And we're giving them something for free, ideally something high value that they would otherwise pay for, ideally. So these are things, and that as they're consuming that, you're also continuing to put out content, nurturing them there. Social proof, right? Your previous wins, other clients like them that you've helped, so on and so forth.
Great message, extremely powerful. I think anyone hears that, I hope they put it into practice. And it's, you have to trust it because you say that from experience. You say that because you've benefited from it. I say the same thing because we've benefited from it. And just the last thing I'll share with you on that is you were talking, it reminded me of a story from a few months ago. I was at lunch or went to lunch with some guys who were in town for a conference I worked with 25 years ago. So I'm old. And they're in different industries. They're senior leaders in their respective businesses. And they mentioned the content that I put out and that Four Corner puts out. And they said, man, it's so great. I love seeing what you do. Or they referenced an article I shared last week, but they both see my content. And I asked them, why do you never like it? I've never seen either one of you like my content. They're like, we don't do that.
That's right.
And I'm like, okay. And I realized that happens a lot, right? Not always so blatantly, but people reference something that I posted. I'm like, can you like it publicly, please? I would appreciate that feedback. But you said it and I'm so glad you did. They're not going to, but it doesn't mean they don't see it. And it is certainly not a reason you shouldn't keep doing it. You look at the views that you get, that shows that people are seeing it. We all want the satisfaction of likes and shares and all that. Of course, it makes us feel good, right? But it's not necessary to be impactful. So thank you, Patrick, for sharing that. But back to RecStack, what else do we need to know about it? Go ahead. And I know I haven't asked all the right questions here. Go ahead and fill in the blanks before I let you go today.
Yeah, so we went in fairly deep detail on the outbound motion. In terms of content, and the way that RecStack helps to solve for that is we have what we call a social planner feature, where the tool will integrate with your social media accounts, whether it be LinkedIn, YouTube. Both of those ideally would be mandatory in my opinion. But we also integrate if you have audiences on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok. I don't, but that integration is available. And the idea is that you create content in bulk, you load it into the social planner and schedule it into the future. That way the system will post that content for you so that you're not becoming a full-time content creator every day. And the way we have a private school community for our users where we have trainings and frameworks on how to do this, and as well as like custom GPTs to help come up with nuanced talking points and lead magnet ideas and this sort of thing. But what I recommend people do is you pick one day a month, and that is your content day. And that all you were doing that day is you were creating content for the entire month. You are getting it loaded into the social planner and scheduled out, and then you're not thinking or talking about content for the next 29 days. That way, again, the whole point of all of this is so that you have more time in your day to go and do the actual stuff that you get paid to do, right? And that's the advantage of using tools like this. The other thing in terms of triggers that we didn't touch on were persona level triggers. So we talked about company level triggers. Persona are like when at the people level, so like the C-suite person, the VP, et cetera, when they are doing stuff that indicate that there's relative intent for your offer with you specifically. So lead magnet opt-ins. So we have a funnel builder inside of RecStack where you can build these lead magnets that they have to opt into before they get the thing. That triggers an outreach campaign, right? To say, hey, what's up, et cetera, et cetera. Website traffic through your outbound, through your content, you should be generating, if you're targeting the right people and everything is, your message is dialed in and so on and so forth, you should be generating some significant traffic to your website. We run that through we run those visitors through a lead scoring process so that we can pick the ones that are actually your ICP persona. And then we reach out to those folks are super high intent leads, people that are engaging with your content, even though we just talked about most of the time they're not going to. Sometimes they do. And so when they like something, when they visit your profile, this sort of thing, those are persona level triggers, as well as if they are engaging with content and webinars of your competitors. So if you have competitors in your space who are doing content and there are ICP leads that are engaging with their content, well, your offer is relevant to them. And so we want to definitely try to get in front of them as well. So at the persona level, we're also running those motions as well. And then outside of marketing, RecStack has, as I said at the beginning, it's positioned as a recruitment business in a box. And so the idea is that we don't want you to have to pay for 50 different platforms. We have business process type stuff as well built into the system. So for example, calendar booking link integration so that you can create Calendly links that you can share, similar to what you would use with a tool like Calendly, e-signature document feature like what you would have with DocuSign. There's a CRM and ATS built into it, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, there's quite a few different things that we got going on there, but
That's a lot.
yeah.
It's a lot. Now, if someone wants to see it, I know you have a great video that's right on your homepage that I watched after initially connecting with you. Very informative. It really is eye-opening to see all that you're doing. It's impressive. So I recommend that everyone watch that at recstack.ai. And we'll put the link in the show notes, of course. But what about demos? Is that something you guys offer, or how do you recommend people really dig in to find out more?
Absolutely. Our website is a great place to start, www.recstack.ai. There's a lot of information, as you've pointed out. You can book a demo with us directly from our website, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to do a live demo with you. We don't offer free trials. I get this question all the time. I'll head that off immediately as an FAQ. We don't offer free trials, and the main reason is because, as I've talked about, all of what we're doing is custom built to your niche. There's a lot of labor and cost on our end to get people up and running. And so we don't offer free trials, although our service, the platform itself, is month to month. There are no long-term contracts, so you can cancel whenever if you're not happy. So yeah.
That's important to offer right now, because I caution everyone who's looking into AI tools that I share our approach internally, which is we're dating. We are not going to marry anyone because things are evolving too rapidly. I hate changing. We all know we don't want to do that. It's painful. We'd like to stick with a solution that's working, and everyone will as long as it works. But that's a really attractive advantage for you guys. So I'm glad to hear you say that. Is there a ideal sweet spot you have? As we mentioned individual operators, but is there a kind of a sweet spot that you guys have?
Yeah, I would say any recruitment agency, we definitely work with a lot of solopreneurs, but we also work with folks that have teams as well. Our solution is really a fit for any recruitment agency owner who sees the value in leveraging technology like AI and automation and running marketing motions that I just described in our conversation here, but don't have the time, the desire, the know-how, what have you, to become experts in that thing, and just want to pay a one-time monthly subscription fee of, right now it's $695. We are planning to raise prices soon, but right now $700 a month to have that done for you is that's who we're for. So
That's a lot of value.
we think so.
Highly
We're
recommend it.
biased, but we think so. Yeah.
It is. I mean, if you can do what you say. Now, I haven't used it firsthand, but I, looking at what you're doing and understanding enough about the technology and what we're doing ourselves internally. I know we're using it more than the AI more than most of some of the different tools out there. What you've put together as an offering is really compelling. I
Thanks.
look forward to staying in touch, man. I know this is going to evolve a lot for you and for all of us. So if you're willing, let's get back together in 6 months and have you, share an update on where you are with everything.
Absolutely.
It'd be
I'd love
really
that.
interesting to see.
I'd love that. Yeah,
Awesome.
that'd be great.
Great. Patrick, thank you so much for all your time today. This has been wonderful as expected, and I look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Thanks, Pete.